Hello and a warm welcome to Mark Langdon's Bets Club, your one-stop shop for football betting insight. It's Jack Reeve, it's Mark Langdon back once more to guide you through another week of footballing goodness. Mark Langdon, you find yourself in your home library once more. How's things with you?
Yeah, I think Thursdays in the office are going to become a regular thing. So, anyone that's watching on YouTube might get to see the extensive form books that we've got here at Racing Post Towers on a regular basis.
It feels a really strange time for football at the moment, Mark, doesn't it? Because there's so much going on. You've obviously got the African Cup of Nations sort of stirring on in the background as well. Have you tuned into any matches there?
I haven't watched any of the AFCON at the moment. It took me several hours to get home last night. I might have watched it, but there was a travel crisis that
Oh,
involved
was there?
two trains, a rail replacement bus, and an Uber before I was able to tuck into my shepherd's pie much later than anticipated. So no, didn't. And no, I've not really been watching the AFCON. I'm going to do. Jonathan Wilson in the Guardian, so he's going out there to cover the knockout stages, and I think that's when I'll kind of tune in. We've been busy at home watching that Michelle Keegan thing on Netflix.
Fool me once.
Fool me once. So I'm trying to get in the good books of the wife by not watching some football that maybe can be swerved. So the FA Cup replays, I didn't watch too much of them. Swapping out AFCON for Michelle Keegan at the moment.
That's not a bad swap, to be fair, Mark, is it?
It's hard life, isn't it?
Plenty going on the continent as well, and Jose Mourinho finds himself looking for work, Mark. And it's always funny, is it, with Mourinho, because he seems like the biggest villain when he's in a job, and then when he's available to take charge somewhere else, suddenly it seems like everybody loves him. He's being linked with a couple of places. You mentioned off air that there are a few markets up and running about his next line of work, wherever that may be. What do you think's next for Jose?
Well, I think he's finished at the top table. I would be surprised. I mean, Newcastle's being mentioned, and I can see sort of the pull of Mourinho, the sort of the figure to maybe go in and a project, to use a really horrible sort of word that is used far too often in football. But you could see kind of why as a figurehead he would be used. But his best days were, I don't know, 20, 15, maybe a decade ago, weren't they? 20, 15, 10 years ago. So I struggle to see the pull of Mourinho, the manager these days. Another job where he's been sacked, another job where the football was dull. He'll say another job where he won a trophy, and it was Roma's first trophy since the early 60s in terms of the European scene. But I mean, it was the Europa Conference League. I'm sorry. If Roma were in the Europa Conference League every year from sort of the 60s to now, they would have won more than 0 European trophies. They were
still a trophy, Mark. Still a trophy.
Yeah, but once Tottenham got kicked out, they were the sort of the richest team in it by a long way. They should be winning it. I mean, look what they served up in the Europa League. Again, they reached the final. I admit they reached the final, but in the final they were just such a horrible watch. His attitude afterwards, how he spoke about the refereeing performance that just wasn't even that bad, how that then kind of played a part, I think, in Anthony Taylor being abused at the airport. And the Roma fans loved Mourinho. And fair play to them. If that's what they like, then more for them. But his style of play at Roma was defend, 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 hope Dybala and Lukaku do something. And that's just not the way that football is these days. You see, well, I suppose it's the way Manchester United play, where they're not quite sure where the next pass is coming from. But if you look at successful teams, they all move in unison, don't they? The whole team moves as a unit. Much more about keeping the ball, wanting the ball, attacking, scoring more goals than the opposition. I think that sort of that sitting on the edge of your area and hoping to keep a clean sheet. It was just football from a different era. Him and Benitez is struggling in Spain, and maybe suggest that him and Jose Mourinho are just from a different era. I think his best hope of getting sort of really successful again is to manage a team in sort of internationally. So, compete in a kind of European Championship, Nations League, World Cup cycle, because I think that football is what you see more often actually in international football. It's about not losing, relying on moments. And he's always been good at that. The psychology, is another strength of Mourinho. He hasn't got to be around the players for 6-7 months and you know that he can grate. So, the fans, it's different, isn't it? International football is different. And I think that Mourinho, let's say it's with Portugal, just because obviously he's Portuguese and you'd imagine that would be the dream job. I could see him managing Portugal and being more successful than I could at a European top league again.
I did see a few Chelsea fans on Twitter, maybe fantasizing with the thought of it. Is that any chance there?
Well, I mean, obviously the Chelsea fans love him, and he gave them some great times, particularly first time around. Second time, they did win a league, but it wasn't quite the same. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. I mean, they're probably the one team that you, I suppose, might. No, not with their young players and what they're trying to build now. I think that would be an incredibly backward.
You nearly convinced yourself.
Well, I mean, I can understand from the fans' point of view. The fans do like, they do like him. But, I mean, if you were an owner, the sporting director, and Chelsea have got so many technical directors and sporting directors and, there's just so many people working for Chelsea. I mean, you'd imagine there'd be one person there with the brains to just say, this isn't a good idea.
Let's move to the Premier League then and discuss things at the other end of the table. Well, we say the other end of the table. Chelsea very much lurking in mid-table at the moment. We of course know the issues that Everton face at the moment, Mark, with FFP. It feels like those three letters are banded about so much nowadays. Nottingham Forest have now been brought into this conversation. And it's interesting, isn't it? Because when Forest came up from the Championship, it wasn't a great side that came up, but they spent so much money. It was very much a scattergun approach. They've got £15 million defenders who were making debuts last night after sitting on the bench for a year or so. So they've gone after it, and now they've been found for potentially breaching rules that could land them in hot water. What's the latest with Nottingham Forest, and where do you find yourself at with it?
Well, my thoughts on it, I suppose I've got Everton's a tricky one, isn't it? Because they've already been docked 10 points and they might be docked more points. And some of that would relate to combinations of seasons where they've already been punished. And you do wonder if that's right, because now, obviously, the Premier League are looking to sort out the sustainability rules quicker. And so that they should be able to get to the punishments within the same season in terms of when you file your accounts, whereas the sort of last Everton one, they were kind of catching their tail, weren't they? So I have some sympathy with Everton. I have less sympathy, though, with sort of any club that votes for these sustainability rules and then potentially breaks them. I mean, if you vote for, you can disagree with the rules, but if you vote to play in a competition that has the rules and then you don't fit into the rules, then you have to be punished. And I don't see why a fine is the right call. I always think it should be a point deduction. I'm going to flip it over to you, Jack, because you're a Norwich fan that's seen Norwich go up to the Premier League a few times, live within their means and come straight back down. No doubt staying within the rules. I mean, so where do you stand in terms of, if you're playing against teams that are breaking the rules, that can't be right, can it?
No, it can't. But you also find yourself, Mark, in a situation where it's essentially lose-lose because, Norwich have obviously been promoted countless times in the past decade and often come straight back down through the fact that we've, one, not had the money to spend. So that option's off the table already. But two, we want to live within our means, because even if you do, splash 100 million quid at it, it's no guarantee of staying in the division. And then you come back into the Championship with real issues and, huge contracts. So last time we went up, in 2019, we went up with Daniel Farker, and the argument was, these guys aren't taking it seriously. They're not giving it a go. It's far from competitive. The second time we go up, we spend, I think, 60 million quid. And then we come back down and you've got a whole host of problems that we're facing now. So you have to spend in the levels that Nottingham Forest are to have a chance. But then you break rules.
But but I mean, you can spend. I mean, you can lose. Was it? You can lose over 100 million, which is a pretty chunky amount. Newcastle. I've seen some Newcastle fans complaining about how it's not fair for them that they can't just go out and spend whatever they want. I mean, they spent extraordinary amount of money to get from a relegation team to one that got into the Champions League. So you can spend money. You just got to spend it sensibly and sustainably. And I don't think there's anything wrong with rules actually that are about sustainability, because you've seen how many teams have chased dreams and ended up, potentially not even having a club to go to support, and then you're walking around with a bucket sort of a couple of years later trying to raise funds. So I support a team that when they were building a new stadium didn't sign a player for 18 months because they were sort of trying to do it sustainably, and hopefully from Tottenham's point of view they'll be able to reap the benefits of that. But I think it's right that the Premier League sort of manages club spending. I do. I think that it become the Wild West previously. Now, again, people will go, well, what about Manchester City? They're different rules that kind of Manchester City have been sort of charged, different breaches that Man City have been charged with. I don't think that it's the same thing. Yes, it should be dealt with quicker. And this is the one thing for Everton and Forest. We don't want to get to a situation where it comes to the end of the season, you don't know which three teams are relegated. I think that would be a complete mess. So hopefully it doesn't get to that stage. But look at Wolves. Wolves had to sell a load of players in the summer because they were worried about breaking the kind of financial rules, and they left themselves short. But they've actually come out of it potentially in a stronger position. But they kind of stayed within the limits. Leicester. I remember when Leicester were talking about, trying to buy their way out of trouble, and then realised that they couldn't when that they were up against it. You can't sort of just ignore it and then hope to not get a punishment at the end of it. If you want the rules to be in place long term, you have to deal with the situations that come up. And look, fans are not to blame when somebody gets an owner that's not the best, and so I do have sympathy there. But I mean, ultimately, my sympathy lies more with the teams that end up getting relegated or miss out on Europe because they're playing to the rules and other teams are not.
Yeah, completely fair enough. Let's get into this week's Premier League action then.
Members Club is now available on the Racing Post app. All Members Club subscribers can now access premium news and tips anytime, anywhere. Plus, if you're not already a member, you'll get 50% off your first 3 months. If you haven't already subscribed yet and want to join the greatest club in racing, simply visit racingpost.com/subscribe.
Right, let's start with our big game this week then. It's Bournemouth against Liverpool. It's Sunday. It's 4:30, 10-3 Bournemouth, 16-5 the draw, 7-10 about Liverpool. I think when Man City were trailing last week, Mark, Liverpool must have been rubbing their hands, and De Bruyne's back, City found a way. It felt like we're back to same old City again.
It would have hurt Liverpool for sure. I think City deserved to win the game over the balance of play, but it was 2-1 for a long time, and even a draw, even when it got back to 2-2, that's still another 2 drop points from Manchester City. And this is a team that doesn't drop many points over the course of a campaign, particularly in the second half of the campaign. And then the pass from De Bruyne, the finish from Oscar Bob, that would have definitely hurt. And you saw the celebrations after the game from Manchester City. They were abnormally wild for Manchester City. They knew it was a big win, and for De Bruyne to come back and be at that level that quickly is I think something that will scare Liverpool. They're very much in the race. They've got a good opportunity, of course, to beat Bournemouth, but it was ominous the way that City kind of ramped it up with De Bruyne back, and his goal was so pleasing on the eye to pass it through the player's legs like he did and find the bottom corner, dazzling. And it's what they've been missing, and we sort of, you forget about him when he's not there, don't you? Because they've got Bernardo Silva, they've got Phil Foden, they've got other talented players, Grealish, and to a lesser extent Doku. I'm not mad on Doku, but they've got all of these talented players. But De Bruyne is the one that if he hits top gear and sort of plays to the level he did at Newcastle, then that's going to make it harder for Liverpool to win the league. There's no doubt about that.
And these are the types of games for Liverpool now that become tricky. They've obviously lost Salah and a couple of others with Asian Cup and AFCON. Bournemouth going along nicely. I think we'll look back at the end of the season, whatever the outcome for Liverpool, it will be these types of games where we go, oh, that was, City pick up a win, Liverpool don't, things start to change.
Yeah, it is the sort of the one of the games I think that Liverpool will be fearing, not sort of externally, not going to sort of, Klopp's not going to be panicking, but he will realise that Hendo has played a sort of significant part. I think Alexander-Arnold's out injured, Salah, of course, is at AFCON, so it is a game that's more complicated by those absences. But I still think that Liverpool have got enough in those forward areas to take advantage of Bournemouth's weakness, which is definitely that they want to play Bournemouth, and they're a joy to watch, and they're aggressive in their press, and all of the things actually that we've seen Iraola do well at Bournemouth might actually not play to the strengths for this game. I actually watched the reverse fixture of this. I was in a pub in Spain, watching this game, and Bournemouth started well at Anfield, caused Liverpool problems, but once Liverpool found another gear, it was a different story, and they just couldn't contain them at the back. So I watched Liverpool v Bournemouth. That was a game I remember. I also watched Brighton against Wolves. That was a game where Brighton absolutely smashed Wolves at Molineux, but we'll get to that one later on.
Is that how you remember your holidays? Is it based on what you were watching in the?
I was double screening, double screening the 2-3 o'clock games. So what else are you to do in an afternoon?
Absolutely. Was it this game in the cup when Nunes scored that outrageous goal? It was a storm,
really
whatever
windy.
It was.
Yeah, it was really windy, and it was. And Liverpool were able to go to Dean Court, or the Vitality as it's now known, and sort of win that tie, and that they're still going strong, aren't they, in the League Cup as a consequence. And I just think you've got so many forward options. Yes, Salah is the biggest and sort of best player of that bunch, but you still got Jota, you still got Nunez, you still got Gakpo, you still got Luis Diaz. It's a frightening prospect, I think, for Bournemouth to try to deal with. I think it'd be a really good game, and interested to see how Solanke does up against Van Dijk. Of course, he used to play for Liverpool, didn't he? Solanke. But when I see that matchup between the Liverpool forwards and the Bournemouth defence, and I think that's where the game's won and lost.
How are we playing it, Mark?
Yeah, but I thought Liverpool were a fair enough price to win. Bournemouth have played 6 games against the top 5 this season, and they've lost 5 of those. So I think it might be a step too far.
Okay, let's whiz through the rest of the Premier League games. Just 4 to get through. Yeah, 2 games on Saturday then. Let's start with Arsenal against Crystal Palace. This one 12:30, 3-10 Arsenal, 19-4 the draw, 8-1 Palace. How are we seeing this one, Mark?
I'm going to go for Arsenal and under 3.5 goals, slightly odds against. We've got a feature going in the Racing Post in Friday's newspaper from our analyst Simon Giles, who's kind of done a deep dive into Arsenal's forwards and kind of why it's not clicking for Martinelli and Saka and whoever else plays up there. And I think I don't want to spoil it, but one of the conclusions is that actually this is the way that Arteta wants to play. He wants to play with more control. He wants the team to not be, I suppose, as wild and as exciting as they were last season. I personally think that's a mistake from Arsenal. I think they're at their best when they're fully into the press and that they just let those sort of forward players go and hurt the opposition.
Is that sustainable though, Mark, over a course of a season?
I'd say I think it's more sustainable than trying to grind it out. I think the lower score in the game, I would say the less chance Arsenal have got of winning sort of matches, because they kind of bring kind of what West Ham did to them and what Fulham did to them more into the equation. I mean, what happened at the end of last season, I don't necessarily think was because of the way that Arsenal sort of went about it and tried to play. I think this was a team that was 50-1 to win the Premier League, and they just played more at their level in the second half of the season than what they did in the first half. They were always likely to regress, and I think it's a mistake to put too much emphasis on why it didn't happen, because they just fell to a level that was more in keeping with them. And so I actually felt like they could step on this year because they'd signed Rice, and I don't actually see them having made sort of big strides forward despite spending more money. But I think this is a winnable game for them, quite obviously, at home to Crystal Palace. Elise was out on Wednesday for Palace's FA Cup defeat at Everton, so not expecting him to play in this one. The fans turned on Roy Hodgson, didn't he? Took off Eze when they were trailing 1-0. He had one eye on this game. I'm not sure that's saving him for 23 minutes and then maybe extra time was the right thing to do. I think it sends out the wrong message. If you don't want to risk Eze, then don't play him in the first place. Don't take him off when you're 1-0 down. That just I can understand Palace's fans' frustration with that. Arsenal, look at their matches at home to teams outside the top six. They've won 6 or 7 at home. I think this is an easier game than West Ham at home and Fulham away that they've had recently. So a return to winning ways for Arsenal, but not necessarily in sort of glitzy fashion. You
mentioned Roy Hodgson there. It feels like the only person with Roy Hodgson is our former colleague Bruce Millington. I mean, you said that the fans have turned on Hodgson. I'm not sure if they've ever been with him, have they?
No, true. That is true. It's true. And I think they just, you can become bored, can't you, with just grinding it out and just existing really, and you want some kind of hope that that maybe a new manager comes in and is just able to play a more attractive style of football. I would like to see kind of a more progressive manager have Eze and Elise in the team and see what they could do. The caveat to that is that Hodgson has rarely been able to play those two players together this season, and actually when they are together, I think you do see a better and more exciting Crystal Palace.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to the evening game. Saturday, 5:30. Brentford taking on Forest. 10-11 the home side. 13-5 the draw. 3-1 Nottingham Forest. Obviously, Forest in the press this week for all the wrong reasons. They were playing midweek in an FA Cup replay, which they managed to get through. Tony's back as well. Am I right in saying, Mark? So that throws up some questions.
Yeah, I'm going to go for Brentford to win the game because Ivan Toney's back. I think he makes a huge difference to just everything that Brentford want to do and are trying to do. I also think that Reguilon is a smart signing because they've had a big problem at left back or left wing back in recent weeks or even months, really, since Rico Henry's really bad injury. So I'm not saying Brentford are absolutely back because they've still got some players missing at the moment, but Toney is a difference maker for them. I've really been unimpressed with his interviews, I would say, leading up to this game. I mean, he's missed so many months for Brentford and he's talking about leaving. Come on. Also, I don't think he's taken enough responsibility for the fact that he broke rules and was betting and, therefore he has to face that suspension. But against all that, I think he's a fantastic footballer. I think he's, in my opinion, sort of the backup striker for Harry Kane for the Euros. And, I think you're going to see a different Brentford with Ivan Toney back in it. Also, don't want to overrate Nuno's start. Nottingham Forest did beat Newcastle and they beat Manchester United. Hoyland wasn't playing for Manchester United. Newcastle were all over the shop on that occasion. So, I'd just like to see a few more games before I'm a true Nuno believer.
I think you're bang on with Tony's medium. I've watched all of the stuff he's done, trying to like him, and it doesn't sort of touch a chord with me. I'm thinking, if I'm a Brentford fan, and we've stood by you through all of this, and then the first opportunity you've got to say, I fancy moving to a bigger club, you must be going, what's the point?
Yeah, obviously he wants to move. He'd be absolutely stupid to not want to move.
You can say it in a more subtle way, can't you?
Exactly. You can say it in a more subtle way, or you can say, look, I've been missing for 8 months. All I'm thinking about here is helping Brentford in the situation we find themselves in. And if that form leads to, bigger clubs coming in for me, then, that's up to, Brentford to decide whether they want to sell me. And, that is how he should have answered it, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Sunday games, two to get through. We've already, of course, looked at Bournemouth against Liverpool. Let's take a look at Sheffield United against West Ham. This one, 2:00, 12-5, Sheffield United, 23-10 the draw, 6-5 West Ham. Which way is this going?
I'm going to go for an upset. I'm going to go for Sheffield United to win the game. There's a doubt over Bowen. I think that sort of the West Ham in the know seem to think that he might be risked, and that does, I suppose, give West Ham, I suppose it does give West Ham a better chance of winning the game. But Kudos and Paquetá, massive players for West Ham. We've seen it, all season, really. I mean, Paquetá, his through balls are fantastic. And, had he not had that sort of the betting accusations hanging over his head, he might have been at Manchester City now. And kudos to West Ham for signing him. He's been a difference maker for them. So they're both absent. Ben Rahman suspended after he got sent off on Tuesday in the FA Cup defeat to Bristol City. So in that game, there wasn't enough going forward, and you're relying so much on Bowen to be able to win the game for West Ham. Now, they're better than Sheffield United, but I actually think that Sheffield United, under Wilder, have steadied the ship, look a sort of more cohesive unit, one that's capable of competing and winning games. You saw that over the Christmas period, got the draw at Aston Villa, didn't they? They beat Brentford as well at home. So I'm going to go for I'm going to go for the Blades to win. Salter up front for Sheffield United, a player that I didn't know much about, looks a real threat actually, and they've got Brereton Diaz in on loan. So it just felt like a good opportunity for Sheffield United to win, and they need to start winning games if they're to have any chance of staying up. And this is one of those that might give them an opportunity to kick on.
Yeah, absolutely. A nice price about them as well. Final game we'll preview this week's Monday Night Football. Brighton against Wolves. Brighton favourites 13-20, 16-5 the draw. Wolves 4-1. Two sides that will be relatively pleased with their happenings so far this season. Mark, Wolves are going really well.
Yeah, I mean, Wolves are going well and still in the FA Cup and got this sort of game they're really looking forward to against their local rivals, West Brom, that we'll cover next week. Brighton in the league, probably slightly below expectations, which in a way shows how well they've done, because we're now expecting them to be challenging for Europe and potentially pushing on even towards the Champions League spots. But in sort of the Europa League, they're safely through to the next round, and I think are a threat in that competition. I'm going to go for Brighton to win and both teams to score. Wolves have only failed to score twice this season, but they did go to extra time in midweek against Brentford. They have got this game coming up as well that I think is important to Gary O'Neill and the supporters against the Baggies. And Brighton nicely rested, and that's something that hasn't happened too often this season. They've been one of the sides that's been worst hit by injuries. The Europa League campaign taken plenty out of the legs. But we saw them dominate against Tottenham and also against West Ham when it finished 0-0. But on XG, there was only kind of one team that looked likely to win that game. So with them feeling fresh, I'm going to go for Brighton to be able to show their best with a Brighton win in a high-scoring game. So Brighton to win, both teams to score.
Excellent stuff, Mark. That's the Premier League card marked off for you. Let's get into the EFL with Dan Childs. If you want some free football bets this season, we've got you covered. Simply head to racingpost.com/free bets
and there you'll find over £200 worth of them for you to use this season. That's racingpost.com/free bets. Well, great to catch up with Dan Childs as always. Always heating up in the EFL this time of year. Can barely catch your breath, Dan. You must be a busy man at the moment, are you?
Yeah. I mean, not quite as bad as it was around the Christmas period when there was sort of 4 games in 10 days. But it's the transfers at the moment. Players in and out. Lots of deals being done. It's just keeping abreast of that really, and which ones are going to make an early impact. That kind of thing.
Sort of at the halfway stage. How's the punting gone so far this season?
Yep, strong season so far. I was going great. Had a good Christmas period, good percentage profit. I won't say the exact amount, but and a little bit of a dip last sort of week or so. But yeah, very good at the moment.
Okay, beers on you at the moment then. Let's get into your team in focus this week. Always nice to see how you're seeing things at the moment, Dan. And it's Salford who always seem to make their way into people's ACCAs and such. How are you seeing them at the moment?
They have done, in the last sort of few seasons, Jack, because they're the sort of team that you expect to be challenging towards the top of League Two. Apparently, their budget is, one of the higher budgets in League Two. So they're a team that expect to be pushing for promotion. But this season, really, they've had terrible injury problems for a lot of the season. Quite often they'd have 10 players out. And Neil Wood, who's a manager, he kind of paid a price for that, really. I think they were trying to give him time because they knew what a tough, period he'd had with injuries. And, it's typical for him that as soon as he's gone, quite a few of the big players have come back, and Carl Robinson now has come in there. And I just think they were getting so near to the relegation area, they thought we can't really risk this, and they've brought Carl Robinson in. I mean, we still kind of see him as a young manager. He's 43, which is a young manager, but he's actually got bundles of experience now. I mean, he started off when he was at MK Dons, 30 years old. He had a long period there, short period at Charlton, and then another long period at Oxford. So he's got a lot of experience, done a pretty good job really at certainly 2 of those jobs, MK Dons and Oxford, over the piece there. And I just think, I mean, whether it's just him coming in or the injured players coming back, probably a bit of both. They have suddenly had a big upturn in performance. I mean, they got 2-2 draw at home to Forest Green, which might not sound a lot, but it stopped a four-game losing run, and apparently they were much more front foot in that game. And then the weekend just gone, they've gone and won 1-0 at Crawley, who are pushing for a playoff place. And you look at the stats for that game, it was 35-10 the shots on target, 12-1 in Salford's favour. I mean, and Crawley's manager Scott Lindsay described the performance from them as their worst of the season. But you look at Crawley's lineup, and it was pretty much full strength. So a lot of the credit really has to go to Salford. The key players coming back, I'll kind of mention a couple of them. Carl Vassell, the defensive rock, he's come back recently. James Bolton, the lively winger, he's back in the frame. Watts, the midfield playmaker, he came back about a month ago. So they are getting some important players back, and I can see them finishing the season strong.
Okay, good stuff. Things are looking up for Salford. 3 selections for this weekend, Dan, across the divisions. Who's the first?
First of all, League One, going to go for Wycombe, draw no bet away to Port Vale. Both sort of lower mid-table teams at the moment, but probably more worried about getting sucked into the relegation area than, they're a long, long way short of the playoffs with the teams, getting a lot of points, the teams near the top of that division. So they're both 7 points above the relegation zone. I think of the two, I think probably Port Vale are at greater risk just because of the amount of injuries that they're piling up at the moment. And they lost their midfield pair, Funzo Ojo and Ollie Arblaster. Ollie Arblaster's had to go back to Sheffield United. He was on loan from them. Those two were excellent for a lot of the season. They both got injured in quick succession. They've lost Alfie Devine this week, has been recalled by Spurs from his loan period there and been sent on loan to Plymouth, which shows you how well he's been playing. Ben Garrity, their top scorer from a midfield area, he's a recent injury. Apparently he's going to be out for quite a few months. So Port Vale's injury situation doesn't look great at the moment. Wycombe they're having a tough season, but they have been picking up recently. 5 wins, unbeaten in all competitions. They had a tough blow at the end of the last weekend when they conceded an injury time goal in a 1-1 draw at home to Lincoln. But as I mentioned, they are playing a bit better recently, and I can see them getting the win here at Port Vale.
Okay, good stuff. Who's up next?
I'm going to go with a top of the table, sort of near the top of the table clash in League Two. Notts County at home to Stockport. Going to go for Notts County. Look, a big price to me here, around 7-4 to win this one. Their home form, Notts County, very, very good. 10 wins out of 13. I can hear people saying to me, but right now that Luke Williams has gone recently, that's a bit of a blow for them, him leaving to Swansea. They had a 5-5, crazy 5-5 draw away to Grimsby last weekend. But I think with Notts County, if you just isolate their home form, they are very, very strong at home. Macaulay Langstaff, the worry there is he's been linked with a lot of Championship clubs. You've got to hope that doesn't come to fruition this week. But they've got other match winners. Dan Crowley from attacking midfield, David McGoldrick, class act at that level. Jody Jones as well, who's apparently their man of the match in the game at Grimsby. So they've got some really good players for the level. And Stockport, although they're top of the league, they're not really playing like champions the last few weeks. They've had no wins from their last 5 away games, Stockport. Quite a few injuries at the moment as well. So Notts County at those odds, around 7-4, looks a good bet to me.
Yeah, big price. Not what I wanted to hear, though, with Stockport in plenty of my anti-post ACCAs for this season. That's 2 down, 1 more to go. Who's next?
Yeah, we'll finish off with Swindon at home to Tranmere in the same division. This is a real... You can't. I'm putting my faith here on Gavin Gunning, who's taken over as their interim manager. Now, Swindon, I think, have underperformed considerably this season under Mike Flynn. Got some good players for the level. Started off really strong, and then fell away. Had a terrible last few months, but I do think that he's going to make an instant impact for them. He's had 2 short interim spells there before. Took 7 points from the 3 games in those interim spells. You look at he's a very confident guy. You look at his interview after taking the job. He believes in the players. He believes in himself as well. And I just sometimes you have a feeling that a manager. Everyone says, "Oh, there's always a new manager bounce." There isn't always. It's some new managers get a bounce, others don't. I think Gunning, with his personality and the way he coaches, I think he will get a bounce. And Tranmere, I think it's a difficult time for them to go there. They've improved under Nigel Adkins, but they have lost their last 2 matches, and I think they're going there at a difficult time. So Swindon for me, comfortably odds against, looks a good bet.
Should be a really exciting weekend. Dan, thanks very much.
You're welcome, Jack.
Right, let's get into Mark's best bets for this weekend then. Mark, we shall start with a bet builder.
Yeah, it's actually in the Monday night game between Brighton and Wolves, going for both teams to score. I think we know the way that Brighton play, wide open, and Wolves themselves have been involved in a lot of sort of high scoring games, and particularly both teams to score have been one of the most frequent sort of both teams to score winners so far this season. And then I'm going to go for 2 players to have a shot on target. Estepinian, he scored some amazing goals already this season since he come back from injury. Loves a dig from distance. He's had a shot on target in 3 of his last 5 matches. And then for Wolves, one of their players of the season, Cunha, the sort of demon dribbler, also capable of getting off a lot of shots. 23 shots on target in his last 14 games. One of those where he didn't was when I put him up on the sweet spot against Chelsea. That was quite frustrating. He had a shot annoyingly blocked that I think was about to go on target in that game. But we'll forgive him that one. So both teams to score, and then a shot on target for Estepinian and Cunha, and that returns around about 6-1.
Okay, great stuff. Treble for this weekend?
Yeah, I've stuck to the Premier League. I know Chelsea's been going on and giving us some EFL tips. I'm slightly worried about the weather and how much of that would be on. Yes. I know it's starting to warm up on Saturday, but whether there's enough sort of give in the ground by then, not sure. So I'm going to stick to the Premier League. I'm going to go for Brentford to beat Nottingham Forest. Ivan Toney and Reguilon, their return and signings, I think, strengthen 2 problematic areas for the Bees. So I'm expecting a better performance from them. Liverpool to beat Bournemouth. Bournemouth have struggled when they've been upped in class this season, and Liverpool, classiest of the lot so far, the Premier League table would suggest. And then finally, because Brighton are nicely refreshed, I'm going for them to beat Wolves, and that returns around about 9-2, the Brentford, Liverpool, Brighton treble.
Like the sound of that. If you were to have one bet this week, what's the strongest? Give me the nap.
I'm going to Italy. Juventus to win at Lecce. Juve don't play the prettiest of football. I think that's fair under Max Allegri, but they have won 13 of their last 15 matches in all competition. Lecce struggling at the wrong end in Serie A. And it doesn't look like it's sort of unlucky from their point of view, because they're bottom 3 on expected goals. They've only got 1 win since mid-September. The only kind of, I think, nervous aspect for me here is that Lecce did draw 2-2 at home to Milan earlier on in the season. But I think Juventus are better than Milan for starters. And the Rossoneri were 2-0 up in that game as well before throwing it away. So, yeah, the old lady, I'm getting with the old lady this weekend. Juventus to win at Lecce.
Great stuff, Mark. I assume your travel chaos has calmed down a little bit with getting into the office today.
Well, I drove today.
Oh, you drove?
I wasn't allowing the train, a bus, and Uber to take the strain. I'd had enough of public transport for one day.
I do always giggle at you inner city types who sort of moan about having to wait, 4 minutes for a tube and a bus replacement. Producer Callum, I'm sure will sympathise. Also being from Norwich, we get sort of a bus a day coming through, and you accept it, Mark.
Okay, all right, we're going to go there. Okay, the replacement bus. that took me one stop on the train last night, and I'm not going to say what time because I don't want to get the bus driver into any kind of trouble. But he actually missed the turn off that he was supposed to go, and then reversed back around the roundabout to get himself
roundabout.
Yeah. Reversed back up the roundabout on a very busy road to get himself back on track. So. Have I got enough reason to complain now, Jack, or am I still an inner city moaner?
Let's call it your first warning.
Okay, we're a score draw.
Pleasure as always, Mark. A big thanks to Dan Childs as well. For loads more betting coverage for this weekend, check out the Racing Post Sport website, and we will be back next week for another episode of Mark Langdon's Bets Club. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.